So when we talk about these organisms, the feature of this group of organisms is that these organisms are non-fermenting gram-negative bacilli. Taxonomically, they might not be related, but when we see their property to break the carbohydrates, then it is generally by the oxidative mechanism. Okay, so these non-fermenting gram-negative bacilli, they do not ferment any sugar. So sugar will not be fermented. That Burkholderia, Acinetobacter, and Stenotrophomonas. However, there are few other organisms as well which are non-fermenting gram-negative bacilli, such as Alcaligens and Elizabeth meningoseptica or Kingella or sorry, Eikenella. But today we will be discussing these four organisms mainly. So first of all, host is immunosuppressed, then it can further progress to disease. So this species is widely distributed in nature and it can colonize humans, healthy humans also. But when sometimes in immunosuppressed condition, it may cause opportunistic infection. So it is a opportunistic pathogen. Now, colonization is basically promoted by Fimbriae, that is pili, and uh, also motility by polar flagellum. So these are the factors which are basically helping in colonization. Then there are certain toxins and enzymes which are produced by Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Now there are various kinds of toxins which are produced, like exotoxin A and certain toxins like SUT, but you should remember exotoxin A only. So exotoxin A is basically a polypeptide in nature, and the molecular weight varies from 6600 to 7200. And when we see the mechanism of action of exotoxin A, it basically inhibits protein synthesis by inhibiting elongation factor 2. So you must be remembering, like, this mechanism of action is similar to the mechanism of action of which toxin? Can anyone tell me? Which toxin acts by inhibiting protein synthesis by inhibiting elongation factor 2? Diphtheria toxin. Very good. So The mechanism of action is similar to diphtheria toxin. So this is the most important toxin. It is a lethal toxin. It has a cytotoxic effect. So and it also diffuses and reaches various kind of tissues and leading to different kind of cytotoxic effect. So it is important toxin. Then there are endotoxin also, that is LPS, because Pseudomonas is a gram-negative organism. So it has a LPS. So this endotoxin can also contribute into virulence. Then there are certain enzymes such as proteases, in which there is a elastase mainly, which helps in tissue injury. Then hemolysin, lipase. So these are the various enzymes which can be associated with the pathogenesis of Pseudomonas. Now, there are different kind of pigments which are produced by Pseudomonas. So, generally, there is a phenazine pigment which is pyocyanin, which is blue in pyocyanin and fluorescein. So this bluish pigment combining with the greenish yellow pigment, which is produced by Pseudomonas aeruginosa, it gives a bluish green color on nutrient agar. Okay, then these pigments are basically water soluble. Then there are certain other less common pigments which can be produced, like red color pigment, which is pyorubin, and brown black color pigment, which is pyomelanin. Okay, but also there are 10% of strains of Pseudomonas aeruginosa which might not produce pigment. So not every strain will produce pigment. There are 10% of strains of Pseudomonas aeruginosa which may not produce pigments. So pigments also helps in the virulence and pathogenesis of Pseudomonas. They also help in virulence by mediating tissue injury. Okay. So now another is there is a alginate coat. Now, what is alginate? Can anyone tell me what is alginate coat? In bacteria, there is a slime layer. Anyone? No? Okay. So this alginate coat is basically a slime layer which is expressed by certain strains of Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which are causing infection in the patient of cystic fibrosis. Okay, so these slime layer are basically helping in biofilm formation and further helping in pathogenesis in cystic fibrosis. Then certain strains of Pseudomonas also have capsule. Okay, and this capsule basically is helping bacteria from phagocytosis, right? Then there are certain features of Pseudomonas. Am I audible? uh, okay, thank you. So now there is another feature of Pseudomonas aeruginosa. As I told you, most of the nil fermenters, they are multi-drug resistance. Okay, and this resistance is intrinsically intrinsic resistance, that is, which is naturally acquired. So naturally, they are resistant to most of the antibiotics. So this is also one of the factor which is helping in the virulence of this organism. Then another factor is multi-disinfectant resistance. Now this Pseudomonas aeruginosa, it can grow in the presence of antiseptics as well. Okay, so certain antiseptics such as Savalon, like cetrimide, okay, which is alkyl trimethyl ammonium bromide, or Dettol, like chloroxylenol. So this organism can grow in the presence of antiseptics also. So in the hospital, sometimes you might see on the surgical tray or on the medicine trolley where the thermometer is put inside the Savlon. That Savlon is sometimes infected with the Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Okay, so this is one of the feature of this organism, that it is multi-disinfectant resistance. However, it is sensitive to certain disinfectants such as 2% glutaraldehyde, okay, and it is also sensitive to silver salts. Therefore, in the burn patient, generally we apply silver salt, silver sulfonamides on the burn patient topically, because Pseudomonas infection can occur in burn patient, and this organism is sensitive to those antiseptics. Okay. Now, when we see the clinical manifestation, this organism can cause infection at almost all sites, most common being lungs, skin, and soft tissues. So most infections, as I told you, are hospital-acquired infection, and the risk factors are like burn wound, immunosuppression, or after surgery when the patient is already immunocompromised. Now, the healthcare associated infections are the most common infections, like ventilator associated pneumonia, central line associated bloodstream infection, or catheter associated urinary tract infection, or surgical site infection, right? Then there are certain chronic respiratory tract infections also, like cystic fibrosis, in which the Pseudomonas infection can occur. Then bacteremia, bloodstream infection can also occur, leading to sepsis and septic shock. Okay. Then infective endocarditis in IV drug abusers. Then it can also cause ear infection, like mild in children. It is also known as swimmer's ear, or it might cause serious necrotizing infection, which is malignant otitis externa. And the risk factor is diabetic patient, which is generally elderly. Okay, so it can cause both mild as well as malignant ear infections. Then eye infections, generally corneal ulcer, mainly in contact lens wearer, and sometimes it can also cause endophthalmitis, generally in post-operative cases. Then there is another terminology, which is Shanghai fever. It is a typhoid-like illness which is seen in tropical areas, similar to typhoid. Then there are certain skin and soft tissue infection like burn wound infection, then erythema gangrenosum, which can occur in the patient of sepsis, in which necrotizing skin lesions can occur. Then nail infection, in which there is a green discoloration of nail, also known as green nail syndrome. And then sometimes cellulitis can also occur, in which there might be pus discharge, and that pus may be blue-green in color due to the presence of Pseudomonas. Okay. Then other infections like bone and joint infection, mainly osteomyelitis and septic arthritis, meningitis in post-operative or post-traumatic patients can also occur. So the list is long because it can affect any tissue, but the only predisposing factor which is necessary is the presence of immunosuppression, because in the healthy individual it may not cause disease. Okay, so generally Pseudomonas aeruginosa, this organism is given in culture exercise in your practical examination. So you must remember the various clinical manifestation of this organism, because the case history that will be provided to you will be based on these infections. So it may be a burn wound case, or a case of cellulitis, or a case of ear infection or eye infection or any post-operative wound infection. So the case history that will be given to you will be based on these various clinical manifestation of Pseudomonas. Okay. Now coming to the laboratory diagnosis of Pseudomonas, now the sample collection will depend upon the type of infection or the clinical manifestation. If it is a cellulitis or wound infection, then pus and wound swab. If it is a catheter associated urinary tract infection, then urine sample. If sepsis is there, then blood culture. So based on the infections which are caused, based on the history, the sample collection will be taken. Okay. Then after sample collection, the first thing that we do is the direct microscopy. And in the direct microscopy, sometimes gram-negative bacilli along with pus cells can be seen. Okay. Then sample will be inoculated on the various culture media. Now, Pseudomonas aeruginosa is a non-fastidious organism and it can grow on any media, ordinary media such as nutrient agar. Okay. Then on nutrient agar, here you can see that pigment production is there. You know, green, bluish green color pigment is there. So it is basically one of the most important identifying feature of the Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Otherwise, colonies are smooth, large, translucent, low convex, 2 to 4 micrometer in diameter. They are generally irregular colonies and with metallic sheen. Okay, some metallic sheen can be seen when you tilt the plate to a acute angle. Okay, then you can observe that metallic sheen on these colonies. Then blue-green diffusible pigment is there and a characteristic fruity odor is also there, which is due to production of 2-amino acetophenol. Okay, so these are the characteristic features that can help you in identifying the colonies of Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Okay, then this organism can also grow on blood agar, in which it can produce beta hemolytic gray, moist, translucent colonies. Then on Mekongki agar, since it is a nil fermenter, it will not ferment lactose. So non-lactose fermenting colony. Okay. Then selective media is also available because sometimes when you want to isolate the organism from the mixed samples, mixed cultures, or the samples which have normal flora also, then we can use selective media, which is generally cetrimide agar. As I told you, this organism can grow in the presence of antiseptics such as cetrimide or Savlon or Dettol. So we basically use cetrimide agar or Dettol agar, okay, which make it selective for the Pseudomonas aeruginosa. In liquid culture mediums such as peptone water, there will be diffuse turbidity and there will be pigment also. Okay, you can appreciate that bluish green pigment in the liquid medium also, and there will be presence of surface pellicle because this organism is aerobic in nature, so it will try to come on the surface. So in the surface you can see pellicles. So this is the type of growth that you can see on peptone water. Here, I want to highlight one point that in examination, generally only one culture plate is given to you regarding any organism. So in Pseudomonas, generally nutrient agar is given, but it doesn't mean that this organism grows only on nutrient agar. Okay, this can grow on blood agar, Mekongki agar, in other media as well. But in exam, we generally give you single plate, either mainly nutrient agar. Then after the culture growth, which is detected after 24 hours of incubation at 37 degree, we can perform motility testing, that is hanging drop, where we can appreciate actively motile organism. Okay. Then identification by certain biochemical tests can also be done. Now this organism is catalase positive and oxidase positive. Now there is another test which is OF test. Okay. Now OF test is an oxidative fermentative test. This test was first described by Hughes and Lifson. So this is also known as Hughes and Lifson oxidative fermentative test. This test is basically used to differentiate the oxidative bacteria from the fermentative bacteria. Okay. So generally in the OF test, we see whether the organism is utilizing carbohydrate like glucose or lactose or any other carbohydrate oxidatively or fermentatively. So OF test is used in which the oxidative pattern will be seen for the Pseudomonas infection. Okay. Then indole test will be negative, citrate will be positive. Urease is generally negative, but few strain can also give weak urease positive, but generally it is negative. In TSI, there will be K by no change because lactose is not getting fermented and there will be no gas formation, no H2S formation. Then after that, we can also use automated method for the identification such as Vitek or Maltitol. Then in the end, we will perform antimicrobial susceptibility testing. There can be diffusion method that you can use, or you can use MIC method, or you can also use automated method for the antimicrobial testing. Okay, so this is how we diagnose Pseudomonas aeruginosa in laboratory. Then there are certain typing methods which are available. These methods are generally useful during outbreaks. Typing method, when we want to know the particular strain of the species which is causing outbreak. So there are various methods which are available, like bacteriocin typing. What is bacteriocin? Can anyone tell me what is bacteriocin or pyocin? No? Okay, so bacteriocin is basically a kind of proteinaceous toxin. It is protein in nature which is produced by a bacteria against uh, other similar or closely related bacterial strain. Okay, so Pseudomonas, it basically produces three types of bacteriocin which can help in the further typing. So we can type various strains of Pseudomonas. Like it has three type of pyocin which are produced, which is R, F, and S. So based on those the sensitivity towards those pyocin, we can divide them into 105 types. Okay. Then other methods are antibiogram typing or serotyping. Then molecular typing methods, which are the gold standard, like pulse field gel electrophoresis or sequence-based typing method can also be performed. So typing methods are mainly useful for the epidemiological studies when and useful during the outbreak investigation. Treatment of Pseudomonas infection, as I told you, this organism, it exhibits high degree of resistance to most of the antibiotics. So only limited antimicrobial agents are there which have anti-pseudomonal action. Okay, so the list is it is generally asked that which antibiotics are anti-pseudomonal. So in penicillin, it is piperacillin, nezulocillin, and ticarcillin. In cephalosporin, it is ceftazidime, cefoperazone, and cefepime. Then certain beta-lactam and beta-lactamase inhibitors combination like piperacillin, tazobactam are also effective. Carbapenem are generally effective. Then in monobactam, it is estriona. Then aminoglycosides and quinolones and polymyxins are also effective against Pseudomonas infection. Now, this was all about Pseudomonas. Now, the other organism which is a nil fermenter is Burkholderia pseudomeli. So, genus Burkholderia have many species like Pseudomeli, Meli, Cepacia complex. So, if we see Burkholderia pseudomeli, it causes disease which is known as melioidosis. Okay. Now, Burkholderia pseudomeli is also widely distributed. It is a saprophyte of soil, water, and it is also seen in certain animals. Okay, so mode of transmission is inoculation, inhalation, aspiration, or ingestion. Man-to-man transmission is very rare. Okay, so virulence factors are like polysaccharide capsule, LPS, toxins, enzymes, and proteins such as hemolysin, lipases, and proteases, just like Pseudomonas. Now, risk factors are again some immunocompromised state like renal failure in adults or traumatic inoculation in children can occur. It has been seen that it is more commonly seen in rainy season and in rice farmers where inoculation can be seen. Then incubation period can vary from 2 days to many years. Now, so it has been seen that there might be a possible latency because the incubation period might be long. So this disease is also known as Vietnam time bomb disease. Okay, this is named so because generally it was seen during Vietnam War. What happens? The U.S. soldiers which were posted there in Vietnam, when they came back after Vietnam War to US, after many years after coming back, they started showing the symptoms of melioidosis. Okay, so there was possible latent infection in those soldiers who were coming back from the Vietnam War, and after many years they were showing symptoms. So hence, this disease is known as, the common name is Vietnam time bomb disease. Now, clinical features can vary. Again, it can cause a localized infection when it is getting inoculated. It can cause localized nodule with fever, general muscle aches, and which can rapidly progress to infect bloodstream. Then subacute infection leading to pulmonary infection can also occur, in which there might be mild bronchitis to severe tuberculosis like pneumonia. Then it can cause acute bloodstream infection as well if the patient is very immunosuppressed, like in HIV or in renal failure. Then chronic suppurative infection, in which various abscesses are formed in various tissues such as joints, viscera, lymph nodes, skin, brain. So multi-organ abscesses can also be seen. Okay, so various kind of clinical presentation and confusing clinical picture can also be seen. So if we see the epidemiology, it is one of the potential agent of biological warfare. So you must remember that Burkholderia meli as well as pseudomeli. Pseudomeli is called melioidosis and meli is causing glanders. Okay, so both these species are basically categorized as category B of the bioterrorism agent. Okay, so both have potential of biological warfare. Then if we see the geographical distribution, it is around 1.65 lakh new cases of melioidosis, which is occurring worldwide. Mortality rate is high, up to 50%. Now, in Thailand, okay, in generally Southeastern Asian countries, Singapore and Indian subcontinent, and Australia as well. In India, it is mainly reported from South India, like Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Kerala. So laboratory diagnosis, depending upon the symptoms, you will collect the specimen like sputum, purulent discharge from the lesion or then direct microscopy may you will see typical gram-negative bacilli with a bipolar or safety pin appearance. Okay, can you name some other organism which shows safety pin appearance or bipolar appearance? Yes. Anyone? Am I audible? Anyone? Any other organism which can show bipolar or safety pin appearance? Very good, Klebsiella granulomatous. Very good, Pooja. Okay, Klebsiella granulomatous is one of the organism. Another organism is any species of Yersinia. If you remember from zoonosis, which species causes plague? Yes, Yersinia pestis. So Yersinia pestis, you must be remembering we do Wesen staining. You know, so Yersinia pestis also shows bipolar staining or safety pin appearance, right? So generally it is very well appreciated when we stain the slide with methylene blue. On methylene blue staining, bipolar staining is seen, and generally it is seen in Yersinia pestis. It is also seen in Burkholderia pseudomeli and Klebsiella granulomatous. Okay, then it is aerobic organism. The colonies, it can grow on blood agar, it can grow on McConkey agar. The colonies are generally rough and corrugated, and there is a selective media for Burkholderia pseudomeli, which is Ashdown's medium. Okay, so this on this Ashdown medium, it produces first. It will produce pale colonies, which will further change its color to purple. Okay, so it is a selective medium because it has a crystal violet in this medium. So it's constituent mainly crystal violet and neutral red as a indicator. Okay, so this is how we grow this organism in culture media. Then further identification can be done. Biochemically, it is very inert. However, oxidative fermentative test can be used to see the oxidative pattern, but generally it will be inert when it comes to utilizing carbohydrate or any other test. Generally, we use this organism is generally resistant to polymyxins. Okay, Burkholderia, genus Burkholderia is resistant to, intrinsically resistant to polymyxins like colistin and polymyxin B. So we can test this organism by testing its resistant to polymyxin B, or we can use automated methods like BIPIC. Okay, then specific anti-sera with the help of latex agglutination test can be used to identify them from the culture. Okay, MALDI-TOF is not yet validated for identifying pseudomeli. So treatment is generally with the help of ceftazimine and carbapenem, because these drugs are mainly effective against this organism. So first we start an intensive phase of 2 weeks, which is followed by a maintenance phase in which we give oral cotrimoxazole. So this treatment will be IV followed by oral drug, in which we give cotrimoxazole. Okay, so this organism is intrinsically resistant to many antibiotic, and it is also intrinsically resistant to colistin and polymyxin B. And post-exposure prophylaxis can be given when there is a laboratory accident, and it is generally given as a combination treatment of cotrimoxazole and doxycycline. Okay, so generally three drugs you should remember: ceftazidime, carbapenem, or oral cotrimoxazole, which are effective. Alternatively, we can give doxycycline also. Now, next organism is Burkholderia meli. So that was Burkholderia pseudomeli. Okay. Now, Burkholderia meli is generally a pathogen of animal, generally horses, and it causes glanders disease, in which there is a nasal discharge and ulcers in nasal septum, and sometimes it can cause skin manifestation and thickening of lymph nodes, which is known as FARSI. Okay, so when the infection is occurring in humans, it is generally transmitted from horses. So it is strictly a zoonotic infection. Okay, and human infection it will lead to skin nodules and lymphadenitis, and further it can progress to pneumonia and respiratory infections. Now, lab diagnosis is similar to pseudomeli, but on gram stain, it might not show safety pin appearance. It may show beaded appearance. Okay, and one of the difference, which is also noteworthy, is that I forgot to tell you in Burkholderia pseudomeli. Burkholderia pseudomeli is oxidase positive, and this organism is motile. Okay, but Burkholderia meli is non-motile and it is oxidase negative. Okay, so pseudomeli, which is causing melioidosis, is motile and oxidase positive, whereas Burkholderia meli, which is mainly causing diseases in horses and it is causing zoonotic infection in humans, is non-motile and oxidase negative. Treatment is same as that of pseudomeli. Now, next species is Burkholderia cepacia complex, which Am I audible now?
Am I audible now? Am I audible now?
Am I audible? Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. So when we see the treatment of Burkholderia cepacia, as I told you, it is intrinsically resistant to most of the antibiotics, including polymyxin. So the treatment line of treatment will be cotrimoxazole, meropenem, and doxycycline. It has been seen that these three drugs are effective. Alternately, we can also use fluoroquinolones such as levofloxacin, or we can use beta-lactam, beta-lactamase inhibitors such as ceftazidime and avibactam. Okay, so this was all about genus Burkholderia. Now coming to the Acinetobacter. Now Acinetobacter, like other nil fermenters, it is also saprophytic bacilli, which is present in the environment. And over the past few years, it has emerged as a nosocomial pathogen. Okay? So out of the, it has many species, out of which Acinetobacter baumannii is the most pathogenic species. Okay. Then Lophi is also there, which is generally isolated in labs, but it is rarely pathogenic to man. There is one species complex, which is Acinetobacter baumannii species complex, which mainly consists of Acinetobacter calcoaceticus, and there are two other species, Nosocomialis and Petae, which are the part of these Acinetobacter complex. Okay. Now, the sources are generally hospital environment or the hospital staff which harbor these organisms. So it can be commensal in skin, oral cavity, or the intestine. Okay. So there are certain unhygienic practices in the hospitals, like contaminated hands of staff when there is no proper hand hygiene. Patients with the underlying disease or immunosuppression, which makes them predisposed to invasion and further pathogenesis. So all these factors are basically promoting colonization. So, membrane protein, which helps in adhesion, invasion, and cytotoxicity through mitochondrial damage. Then again, the lipopolysaccharide, it leads to inflammatory response and tissue injury. And like other nil fermenters, it has ability to form biofilm. What is biofilm? Can anyone answer? Have you heard about biofilm? Okay, Kartike, it says it is a modified slime layer. Okay, anything? Anything else you would like to add? Slime layer is there, but what is inside the slime layer? There are millions of bacteria. Okay, so biofilm is a kind of a microcolony of a bacteria in the presence of slime layer. Okay, so this biofilm is very difficult to remove with the help of antibiotics. So generally biofilm formation takes place whenever there is a instrumentation like catheter or shunts. So these when there is a surface which helps in formation of biofilm. So the first step of the colonization is biofilm formation. Okay. So all these gram-negative organisms which are nil fermenter and basically leading to colonization and nosocomial opportunistic infection, they generally have this ability to form biofilm. Okay. And this slime layer that I was talking about, it is the alginate layer generally in Pseudomonas. And the slime layer, what is the difference between slime layer and capsule? Or is it the same, slime layer and capsule? Slime layer is generally loosely present surrounding the bacteria. Okay. Yes, very good. Kartike, capsule is tight and firm. Slime layer is loose structure, amorphous structure, which is present outside the bacteria. Okay, so these are the virulence factor of Acinetobacter. And again, it is a multi-drug resistant. Generally, Acinetobacter baumannii complex, which is a nosocomial pathogen, is a multi-drug resistant pathogen. Okay. So now clinical manifestation are generally hospital-associated infections such as ventilator-associated pneumonia, central associated bloodstream infection, post-neurosurgical meningitis to infect. Okay. So laboratory diagnosis is generally you take the sample, depending upon the clinical feature, you make direct smear, direct gram stain. If you are able to see gram negative, Coccobacilli in this case. Okay. Then you will culture these organisms on culture the sample on blood agar and McConkey agar. On blood agar, non-hemolytic colonies will be seen, and on McConkey agar, there will be presence of non-lactose fermenting colonies, but there will be slightly faint pink colored colonies, which you will be able to appreciate. Okay. So on gram staining, when you will perform, it will be gram negative Coccobacilli. Now this organism is oxidase negative, unlike Pseudomonas, and it is catalase positive. And it is a non-fermenter of sugars, and it is also non-motile. So it is a lactose non-fermenter, non-motile organism. Okay. Generally, it is indole negative, citrate positive, urease negative. In TSI, there will be K by no change with no gas and no H2S. Further species identification can be done with the help of MALDI-TOF or VITEC, and antimicrobial susceptibility testing can be performed by disk diffusion methods or by MIC method or by automated methods. Okay, so the treatment of Acinetobacter infection is generally carbapenem can be given, but most of the hospital-acquired isolates are resistant to carbapenem. Then we shift to beta-lactam, beta-lactamase inhibitor combination, tigecycline or polymyxin. This is mainly for nosocomial pathogen. Okay. Now the last organism is Stenotrophomonas infection, Stenotrophomonas maltophilia, which is a opportunistic pathogen, and again its colonization is favored by immunocompromised condition, patients who are on broad spectrum antibiotics. Now, clinical manifestation, again, this organism has been seen in hospital associated infection, such as ventilator associated pneumonia, bloodstream infection, then skin infection in neutropenic patient, then UTI, catheter associated urinary tract infection. Now, this organism can also grow on blood agar, McConkey, and this organism is oxidase negative. Okay. Now, conventional biochemical testing can be performed or by identification by automated system can be done, and in which we can use MALDI-TOF or VITEC. Now, when we talk about again, this organism is intrinsically resistant to most of the antibiotics. Okay, so like all the nil fermenters, again this organism is found to be resistant to most of the antibiotics, and the recommended antibiotics are again cotrimoxazole, minocycline, and levofloxacin. So it has been seen that these drugs are mainly effective against Staurotropomonas infection. So this was all about the gram-negative nil fermenter organism. So the important organism from the exam point of view is Pseudomonas aeruginosa, in which a theory question can also come, as well as it can be asked in culture exercise. Whereas other organism might be asked, you must know the list of various organisms which are basically implicated in hospital associated infection. So these organisms are mainly the nosocomial pathogens. Okay. So this was all about today's lecture. Any question if you would like to ask, you can write in the chat box.